Section 7 of The Case of the Golden Bullet by Grace Isabel Colbron and Auguste Groner. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. An hour later the chief and Muller stood in the garden of the house in which the murder had occurred. Bauer had entered from the promenade after Muller had showed him how to work the lock of the little gate. Together they went up into the apartment, which was icy cold and uncanny in its loneliness. But the two men did not appear to notice this, so greatly were they interested in the task that had brought them there. First of all, they made a most minute examination of the two doors, which had been locked. The keys were still in both locks, on the inside. They were big, heavy keys, suitable for the tall, massive, heavily panelled and iron ornamented doors. The entire villa was built in this heavy old German style, the favorite fashion of the last few years. When they had looked the locks over carefully, Muller lit the lamp that hung over the desk in the study and closed the window shutters tight. Bauer had smiled at first as he watched his protégé's actions, but his smile changed to a look of keen interest as he suddenly understood. Muller took his place in the chair before the desk and looked over at the door of the vestibule which was directly opposite him. "Yes, that's all right," he said with a deep breath. Bauer had sat down on the sofa to watch the proceedings. Now he sprang up with an exclamation. "Through the keyhole?" "Through the keyhole," answered Muller. "It is scarcely possible." "Shall we try it?" "Yes, yes, you do it." Even the usually indifferent old chief of police was now breathing more hastily. Muller took a roll of paper and a small pistol out of his pocket. He unrolled the paper, which represented the figure of a French soldier, with a marked target on its breast. The detective pinned the paper on the back of the chair in which Professor Fellner had been seated when he met his death. "But the key was in the hole," objected Bauer suddenly. "Yes, but it was turned so that the lower part of the hole was free. Johann saw the light streaming through and could look into the room. If the murderer put the barrel of his pistol to this open part of the keyhole, the bullet would have to strike exactly where the dead man sat. There would be no need to take any particular aim." Muller gazed into the space like a seer for whose mental eye a vision had arisen, and continued in level tones. "Fellner had refused the duel, and the murderer was crazed by his desire for revenge. He came here to the house. He must have known just how to enter the place, how to reach the rooms, and he must have known also that the Professor, coward as he was—" "Coward? Is a man a coward when he refuses to stand up to a maniac?" interrupted Bauer. Muller came back to the present with a start and said calmly, "Fellner was a coward." "Then you know more than you are telling me now?" Muller nodded. "Yes, I do," but he answered with a smile, "But I will tell you more only when I have all the proofs in my own hand." "And the criminal will escape us in the meantime?" "He has no idea that he's suspected." "But you'll promise to be sensible this time, Muller?" "Yes, but you will pardon me my present reticence even towards you? I don't want to be thought a dreamer again." "As in the Kuyp case?" "As in the Kuyp case," repeated the little man with a strange smile. "So please allow me to go about it in my own way. I will tell you all you want to know tomorrow." "Tomorrow, then. May I now continue to unfold my theories?" Bauer nodded, and Muller continued. "The criminal wanted Fellner's blood, no matter how." "Even if it meant murder?" said Bauer. Muller nodded calmly. "It would have been nobler, perhaps, to have warned his victim of his approach, but it might have all come to nothing then. The other could have called for help, could have barricaded himself in this room. One crime might have been prevented, and another more shameful one would have gone unavenged." "Another crime? Fellner a criminal?" "Tomorrow you shall know everything, my kind friend. And now let us make the trial. Please lock the door behind me, as it was locked then." Muller left the room, taking the pistol with him. Bauer locked the door. "Is this right?" he asked. "Yes, I can see the wide curve of the room, taking in the entire desk. Please stand to one side now." There was a deep silence for a moment, then a slight sound of metal on metal, then a report, and Muller re-entered the study through the bedroom. He found Bauer stooping over the picture of the French soldier. There was a hole in the left breast where the bullet passed through, and had buried itself in the back of the chair. "Yes, it was all just as you said," began the chief of police, holding out his hand to Muller. "But why the golden bullet?" "Tomorrow, tomorrow," replied the detective, looking up at his superior with a glance of pleading. They left the house together, and in less than an hour's time Muller was again in the train rolling toward the capital. He went to the goldsmith's shop as soon as he arrived. The proprietor received him with eager interest, and Muller handed him the golden bullet. "Here is the golden object of which I spoke," said the detective, paying no heed to the other's astonishment. The goldsmith opened a small locked drawer, took a ring from it, and set about an examination of the two little objects. When he turned to his visitor again, he was evidently satisfied with what he had discovered. "These two objects are made of exactly the same sort of gold, of a peculiar old French composition which can no longer be produced in the same richness. The weight of the gold in the bullet is exactly the same as in the ring." "Would you be willing to take an oath on that if you were called in as an expert?" "I am willing to stand up for my judgment." "Good. And now will you read this over, please? It contains the substance of what you told me yesterday. Should I have made any mistakes, please correct them, for I will ask you to set your signature to it." Muller handed several sheets of close writing to the goldsmith, and the latter read aloud as follows: "On the 22nd of November, a gentleman came into my shop and handed me a wedding ring with the request that I should make another one exactly like it. He was particularly anxious that the work should be done in 2 days at the very latest, and also that the new ring in form, color, and in the engraving on the inside, should be a perfect counterpart of the first. He explained his order by saying that his wife was ill, and that she was grieving over the loss of her ring, which had somehow disappeared. The new ring could be found somewhere as if by chance, and the sick woman's anxiety would be over. 2 days later, as arranged, the same gentleman appeared again, and I handed him the 2 rings. He left the shop greatly satisfied with my work, and apparently much relieved in his mind, but he left me uneasy in spirit because I had deceived him. It had not been possible for me to reproduce exactly the original composition of the ring, and as I believed that the work was to be done in order to comfort an invalid, and I was getting no profit, but on the contrary a little extra work out of it, I made 2 new rings, lettering them according to the original, and gave them to my customer. The original ring I am now, on this 7th day of December, giving to Mr. Joseph Muller, who has shown me his legitimation as a member of the secret police. I am willing to put myself at the service of the authorities if I am called for." "You are willing to do this, aren't you?" asked Muller, when the goldsmith had arrived at the end of the notice. "Of course. Have you anything to add to this?" "No, it is quite complete. I will sign it at once." Section 7